5:34.
Are you ready? Thanks, Trevor.
I think
Okay. Hi, David.
I still haven't confirmed if people can hear me on the Teams meeting, but
You want me to try?
yeah,
Or,
just start talking and we'll figure it.
Hello, welcome everyone. Can we get a confirmation for the online participants that you're able to chat with Trevor Rice?
No sound, not hearing your sound.
Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, check, check.
Okay, Paul, that'll be you. I'll be with the Science for Kids.
All right, can I get my mic test?
Online, can you hear us now? And can you see us? Can you send us a chat to Trevor Rice if you can have audio as well as visual?
So I'll introduce
I'll introduce it because I know him.
Okay,
But I'm going to introduce you first as our facilitator.
okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I think it should be good.
Okay, we're doing another audio and visual check with the online participants. Can you chat to Trevor Rice if you can see us and hear us? Okay.
It's fine.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
We're good. All right. Thank you, everyone that is participating online. So my name is Julie White. I am the chair of the South Texas section for 2022. It's my privilege to serve you all in that capacity. We have over 20 volunteers that run our section. We're the largest section in the United States and actually throughout the world. We have 29 counties, or 28 and a half to be exact, and we have access to over 2,800 members in the Houston area, those of which are about 800 are members of the South Texas section. I'd like to first introduce our coordinator or facilitator for our event, Paul. Step up.
Hi.
Paul is our communications director. Paul is responsible for website, newsletter, all things communication, and he will be facilitating our meeting today. And then I'd also like to give a shout out to Trevor Rice, who is doing our online system for MS Teams, which is a true challenge but opportunity for those who are wanting the flexibility of the online approach for the hybrid format that we are striving for this year. So thank you. For those who have been caught in logistic issues in the past, we are figuring it out as we go, and we're getting almost 90%, so we're doing better. So on this note, I'd like to introduce AJ Jarrett. I met AJ in October, November of last year during a conference. He was chairing a group of experts at Texas A&M in cybersecurity. And Jack Chosnick, who's in our audience, part of Mary Kay O'Connor Process Safety Center and the symposium team, the lead actually of the symposium, we invited AJ to speak. And it was a very well-known attended workshop. And I ran into the end of it, and I talked to him for about 5 minutes, and he knew right away he'd be an excellent speaker. So at that point in time, he shifted to the private sector, and we patiently waited for his schedule to come open. And ironically, the timing is the hottest topic, I think, on the planet, right now for cybersecurity. And so he works in the private sector for AMSIS. He's the Director of Cybersecurity, Defense, and Compliance. He has over 15 years' experience as a practitioner in cybersecurity and has developed curriculum as part of the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium. as well as directing technical projects and incident response engagements supporting Homeland Security, Department of Defense, National Security Agency or NSA, and various other public and private sector customers. He has a broad background of work experience, including cybersecurity, IT infrastructure, fire EMS, emergency management, and startups. He has previously served as Vice President and Education Director for the Central Texas chapter of Information Systems Security Association and as a guest instructor at FEMA's Emergency Management Institute. He's also been a guest lecturer at Bush's School of Government and Public Service. He holds several industry certifications, is a member of both NIST Public Safety Communications and Research Directorate Stakeholders Group and the NIST Manufacturer Extension Partnership Working Group on Cybersecurity. He is also an active member of FBI InfraGard Houston Members Alliance. Mr. Jarrett is qualified as a Planned Section Chief and Logistics Section Chief and is currently a member of the Type 2 Incident Management Team. He is deployed in multiple disasters, including Harvey and the ongoing COVID pandemic and several state-level cyber incidents. Please welcome AJ.
Thank you. We're going to have to shorten that intro, geez. All right, so I am very proud to be here. Very fortunately, I have transitioned from my job at Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service to AMSYS Innovative Solutions, which is about 20 minutes up the road. Well, 20 minutes normally, 30 minutes with that accident down there, but you know. But it was very, very awesome to be able to come down here today, and I very much appreciate being invited. Also appreciate the folks that make this happen and everything else, because yeah, living in the COVID times is kind of interesting, right? A lot of fun IT problems. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So before we get started, just a quick note of caution. We're going to talk about some things, and we're going to have some discussions, and I'm going to encourage some back and forth. And I just ask that you use professional discretion with the information that we're going to talk about today, because some of it might be a little bit sensitive. Nothing top secret or anything like that, but still. All right, so who am I? Julie did a fantastic job of basically summing it up. I'm a nerdy firefighter. So I got into emergency management and fire EMS when I was younger. I broke my back, unfortunately, so I couldn't do that, and I went back into IT. Which has turned out to be really, really good for me. So I kind of marry the emergency management and homeland security aspect of cybersecurity with the technical aspect of cybersecurity. So I break down cybersecurity into police and fireman speak. All right, so we're going to start off. This is going to be sort of a back and forth. So those of you who are online, ask you to go ahead and throw comments in the chat from time to time. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to watch some videos. It's definitely very helpful if we got some back and forth. So to break the ice here, how serious is your organization about cybersecurity? Anybody want to talk about it? How about this? Raise your hand if you think your organization's cybersecurity is above average. All right, that's good. About a third of you. That actually tracks really well with a lot of the stats that we're seeing, which is about 68% of chief information security officers feel that they're not adequately prepared for a cyber incident. So that's part of the reason that we are here today. So I'm going to play a funny video. Oh no, we don't have audio. Ready? Or can we not do audio?
It'd be tricky now.
Oh no.
Sorry.
Darn it. I had a very funny video about Jimmy Fallon going out and asking people what their passwords were, and then them telling. It's really, really funny. So everybody, go on YouTube after this and go look for Jimmy Fallon password video. It'll be worth a chuckle. Or Jimmy Kimmel, yeah, sorry. I cut the cord like 8 years ago, so I don't know who's on TV anymore. Anyway, so it would have been very funny, people giving their passwords out to a TV film crew out in LA, which seems like a very fantastic thing to do, right? So why are we here? Well, ransomware, which I'm assuming we all know, but if you don't, it's a type of malware that encrypts your files and holds them for ransom, asks you for payment, usually in Bitcoin or Monero. It is up 600% since COVID. In 2020 alone, it cost the United States in lost productivity and direct damages $4.1 billion. Just, that's what's been reported. There's a whole lot that we all know about that probably is not going into these metrics. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the FBI have been sending out a lot of notifications in the last couple of months, specifically about critical infrastructure and threat actors that are targeting critical infrastructure. So that's part of the reason that we're here, is we operate in critical infrastructure spaces where if something goes wrong, it can go very, very wrong and have a large impact on society. So it's very important that we take a moment and work on our cybersecurity and talk about it. And some of you are probably thinking, oh, well, I have nothing to do with cybersecurity. Don't worry, we'll get to that. I'm not gonna just talk to you about cybersecurity as a cyber person and saying, oh, you know, go implement these things. We're gonna talk about it both from if you have the power to affect budgets and if you don't. But my hope is to make some of you evangelists after this. Would have been way better with my funnier videos, though. All right, so other impacts. These are some headlines that I pulled just the other day. Who's heard of Norsk Hydro, by the way? Anybody hear about that attack? A couple people. The cool thing about Norsk Hydro is they got hit with ransomware, and it shut them down hard for like 10 days. But they were completely transparent about it. So they actually went out and they said, this is what's going on, this is what we're seeing. They communicated with their employees right away, and they just kind of took the hit. So they're sort of the model for if you have a bad day and all of your disaster recovery and business continuity stuff doesn't work, well, at least you can win the PR battle. There's some other ones here. So who heard about the LNG producers that were targeted in the buildup to the Ukraine war? Yeah, so I think it was 23 or 25 LNG producers in the United States and Western Europe were actually targeted and breached by what we believe to be the Russian government in the lead up to the Ukraine war, because they were predicting that there were going to be some impacts there to their own LNG operations. They didn't, fortunately, they were unable to do anything all that terrible. They were detected and shut down very quickly, but still kind of scary. Could have been very, very bad. And then, of course, we have our famous U.S. pipeline. Who's heard of Colonial Pipeline? Yeah. But then there's another one that actually came out in February, Black Cat ransomware, which is not affiliated with a nation state. However, it affected a bunch of German oil and gas producers and some chemical plants, which was kind of interesting. Didn't get a lot of play in the news, but it was sort of a big deal over there. I mean, they had a couple hundred gas stations get shut down, similar to our Colonial Pipeline. So this is happening all the time, constantly. Some of it we hear about, some of it we don't. The big thing is we have to realize that this is now our reality and start working on ways to reduce and mitigate these impacts. I like to tell people it's no longer a matter of if, but when. We used to pile up our security at the border and say, we're going to stop the attacks, right? We're going to put firewalls in place. We're going to put antivirus on the computers, and we're going to, we're just going to prevent the bad thing from happening. Yeah, we're way beyond that. Now it's, there are two types of people, those who have been breached and those who don't know that they've been breached yet. That's the world we now live in. The big thing is mitigating those impacts if we can. So our threats. Who's ever heard of business email compromise? Got a couple few hands, awesome. And phishing, who's heard of phishing? Not the kind with the, real, the kind I like to do on the weekends, no. But the email phishing, yeah, those are the #1 threats. Over 80% of successful attacks start through email. Yeah, giant attack surface. Why do you think that ransomware is up so much during COVID? Any thoughts? Giving you, Yeah, we got people working from home, and we now know that the biggest threat vector that we have is email. So what happens when we're at home? What happens when we're not at work and we're maybe not using work computers? Are we checking our personal email on there too? Browsing Facebook? Guilty. Been there, done that, but or LinkedIn or what have you. So the problem we're seeing is that it's no longer the infrastructure that's being targeted as much. It's the users, and it really always has been, but that doesn't get the play. Ransomware is a big deal. Has anyone here gone through a ransomware event? Couple, yeah. It's not fun, is it? There's some ways we can mitigate that. One of the biggest ones being backup and having business continuity procedures that are very, very robust, and practicing them and testing your stores on your backups. We've been seeing now attacks on industrial control systems and SCADA. We have seen actual attacks on industrial control systems and SCADA. We have crossed an important threshold in that last year. We had a water district down in Florida actually have their SCADA system accessed and changed, where values were changed in the SCADA system. It was caught fairly quickly, but nonetheless, it's kind of scary in the United States. We're going to talk a little bit later why that's not really a first. There have also been lots of other breaches of industrial control systems and critical infrastructure all over the place. About a third of U.S. utilities have suffered some sort of breach that's been detected to varying degrees in the last couple years. And then we're going to talk about advanced persistent threats. Who's ever heard of APTs, besides my associate Tyler here? No, nobody's heard of APTs. Excellent. So advanced persistent threats. You got different levels of threats, right? You know, you've got your ones like that are doing business email compromise, where their goal is to get into your email system, get somebody to transfer some money, change an account number, something like that, commit some sort of fraud or target your customers. Advanced persistent threats, those are primarily your nation states, though we are starting to see very advanced hacker groups that are also advanced persistent threats. The idea being, instead of just getting in and hitting you, they get in and they stay. Anybody know what the average time to detection for a breach is? Anybody want to venture a guess? Who thinks it's less than a week? One hand. All right. Who thinks it's less than a month? Couple hands. Couple few hands. I kind of set myself up poorly here. Who thinks it's less than 3 months? Less than 4? Within 5? Well, about within 6 months. I think we've gotten most people. It's about 200 days. It's almost a year. Like 3/4 of a year. How scary is that? 200 days. And that's for all types of attacks, not just the advanced persistent ones. Advanced persistent threats, those are the scary ones. Those are, you know, your nation states, that is Russia and the GRU, that is North Korea, that is Iran, to some degree, that is China in a very big way. And they are very quiet. They use what are called zero-day vulnerabilities, which are vulnerabilities that we don't know about, have not been disclosed, and there are no patches for. And they are incredibly effective. And a lot of times what these APTs are doing is they're just gaining persistence. Their goal is to just have a foothold and then to be able to do something with that knowledge and capability later. So since we're talking engineering here, let's talk about industrial control systems. Why are they scary? So SCADA, or OT, operational technology, highly vulnerable. Anybody disagree with that? A lot of people shaking their heads no. Yeah, so why do we think, other than the bullet points I have up here? Should have hidden them and then, you know, displayed them one at a time. Any thoughts? Yes, sir. Changing control points, yeah? Oh no, they are definitely not hardened. Not hardened whatsoever at all. Any other thoughts? Anything from the onlines?
Probably put together by people that have no idea about security.
No, put together by people. Put together by people who don't know anything about security. That's actually sort of ties into my last bullet point here. So First and foremost, a lot of times, industrial control systems are old. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Also, if we have a huge facility, how much does it cost to rip that stuff out and put a new one in? Oh, because it supports Modbus 3 now. Neat. So, drop 10 million to rip it out. Oh, by the way, you're going to be down for 2 weeks. And then, put in new hardware. So that legacy hardware is old. It was not originally designed with security in mind at all. So a lot of the protocols like Modbus 1 and 2 are not encrypted. They are plain text over the wire, which is terrifying if somebody has physical access to your network or even virtual access to your network. They're not designed with security in mind at all, and usually they're such small, lightweight appliances, they don't have the processing power to handle encryption, a lot of the old ones. It wasn't built in, it wasn't optimized for it. We now have certain things that are actually specifically optimized for these small embedded systems, like Wolf SSL and stuff like that, that run lighter weight encryption, that give you some level of protection. They usually don't support strong passwords. Who here has logged into your bank and tried to set a passphrase? First off, who here knows what a passphrase is? All right, somebody tell me. Oop.
So that in order to get a strong password, you wind up just having an awful lot of characters, but since it's a sentence or a phrase or something, the character count makes it hard to guess, but easy to remember.
Yes. So it's a sentence. You write out a sentence. I recommend spaces and all. And it's very easy to remember. It's a very long character count. If we didn't have such a delicate setup here, I would switch over and show you the math, where the longer the password gets, the harder it is to crack. If your password is less than 8 characters and it's just letters, that can be cracked offline in a few minutes. If you go out to 16 characters with just letters, that goes into a few hours. If you add in numbers and symbols, that starts getting into several hours. If you get out longer into 16, 20, 25 characters, that starts getting into years, centuries, and millennia. Yes, sir?
Yeah, well, what's aggravating about that is you gotta remember the darn things.
Yeah, you have to remember them, right?
And then you, in some cases, you change them every 90 days, and you can't use the same thing, et cetera.
Yes, and we expire passwords. That has been a common thing, and in fact, a lot of control standards coming out of the federal government and SOC 2 and things like that are actually requiring it, but what we're starting to find in security research is, guess what happens when we do that? People write them down, yeah.
Or they make bad
Or
passwords.
they make bad passwords. They append a 1 to the end, or a 2, or a 3, or so on and so forth. So passphrases allow you to make your password very, very complex, but easy to remember. That said, anybody here use a passphrase and try to log into, let's say, a banking website? Well, some of your banks will take it just fine. Some will say, we don't support spaces and we don't support certain special characters. Anyone want to venture to guess why? Anybody here ever heard of a company called IBM and a system called an AS400? Originally built in 1984. The year my parents got married. Sorry, guys. But the reason being is that there's a mainframe underneath that is not designed to support complex passwords, and it can't parse those special symbols. In the case of SCADA, we have a lot of that going on too, where it can only be letters and numbers, no special characters, no spaces. In some cases, the buffer length is even so short, it's like you have a maximum number of characters you can put in, like 16. And if it's longer than that, it's not going to take it. So that's sort of a big problem. And then we're supported by a different team in a lot of organizations. Typically, you have your IT and your security team who have now started to get used to working together now, finally. It's taken 7-8 years, but we're there-ish. But then you have your OT team, which is usually run by a different group of people with express knowledge in your operational technology. A lot of these people are not cybersecurity people. In fact, almost all of them are not cybersecurity people. So we have that another disconnect that we have to close here. So that's a big issue and can cause some serious problems when it comes to responding to cyber events in our industrial control systems. Also, when we're designing the networks that they go on and things like that, because the folks who are responsible for that, it's just not their forte. And as a security guy, I will tell you, we're pretty busy on our end, so if you don't make a lot of noise and you don't bring problems to us, in some cases we just go, hey, I've got a whole stack of problems over here, I'm going to work on those first. So again, kind of doubles down. I hate to besmirch my cybersecurity comrades, but sometimes it's not the highest priority. Who here works in an industrial environment and can get to SCADA stuff from the same place you get to your email? No one wants to raise their hands. Yeah. I can tell you that I have gone into customer environments where that is the norm. We are starting to see better stuff in terms of jump boxes and things of that nature, but and segmentation in the network. But again, it's expensive, it takes time, it causes downtime, which is sort of a problem in an industrial setting. So let's talk about the big ones. So we've got Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Anybody ever heard of these countries? Yeah, no, yeah, I'm just being intentionally dense at this point. But all of these countries have something in common, along with Brazil, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, us, Canada, the UK, Australia, France, Germany, etc. You know what they have in common? Industrialized. That they do have that in common. Militarized. Yep. And offensive cyber capabilities run by the government. We have it. They have it. Everybody has it now. It's the new hotness. It's big deal. But cyber is now being used as a tool for geopolitics. If you've noticed some of the things going on lately, we have hacktivists hacking Russia. We have Russia taking down organizations that support the Ukraine. We have intellectual property theft going on. So China. If you think China, think industrial espionage, intellectual property theft. They're breaking into our systems. They're stealing our designs. They're looking at the way we build things. They're looking at our processes, and they're stealing them. If it's intellectual property and it can help China prosper, they will take it. It has become such a problem that the United States military has implemented what's called CMMC, which is a Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Anybody heard of that? Everybody's shaking their heads no. That is good, because I'm here to tell you it's a little painful. Someone who's had to work in that space for the last 5 or 6 years. But the idea is that the United States military has now flowed down requirements to all of their vendors to say you must have at least some cybersecurity capability in place, and you have to demonstrate it to us, or we're not going to renew your contract. So that goes for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and everybody else, but that also goes down to the little manufacturer down the street here who makes a wiring harness that goes in the F-35, which in and of itself is not classified because it's just colored wires with connectors. But if it's combined with enough other pieces from subcontractors, could get you close enough to build something that looks like it. The reason I use the F-35 is because I don't want to talk about the Missile Defense Agency, but if you want to be scared and not sleep, look for the Missile Defense Agency hack. That's why CMMC came about. Traditional espionage, cyber is a huge tool that enables traditional espionage. And then we have cyber warfare. So cyber warfare, what is that? Well, one of the things is the United States Space Force. Guess what else they do? Well, does anybody know what they actually do besides Space Shuttle Door Gunner? So, typically they're operating satellites, doing geospatial stuff and things of that nature, but they also are doing more and more into cyber. And the United States Cyber Command, we have all the branches of the military and the NSA cooperating to give us an offensive cyber capability. We have DHS, CISA, and the Secret Service on the defensive side trying to defend us. But we're seeing cyber warfare more and more and more. And now I wish I could stand up here and give you a case study about the Ukraine war and say, cyber warfare is alive and well, but we'll talk about this in depth a little later, but we're actually seeing something a little bit different. But we know the capability is there. Remember how I said a third of, utility companies have been breached? Most of those breaches have been by nation states, at least the ones that we've been detecting. I think, last week, the U.S. Attorney's Office indicted some Russians for breaking into some critical infrastructure. I mean, symbolic indictments if they ever leave Russia, yay. But still, cyber warfare is a thing. We have the capability, they have the capability, and we're constantly breaking into each other's stuff to say, one, hey, we can do it. So if you like your lights being on and your pipelines to work and your infrastructure and your manufacturing to happen, well, maybe don't mess with us. And then we do it to them, they do it to us. And then also there are more insidious things out there, and that's what keeps me up at night, is the stuff that we haven't found. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about cyber warfare. So this one does not need sound. Maybe. Oh, hang on. Are we gonna play? I guess not. Okay, well, video's out. What I was gonna show you was actually a bunch of operators in a power station in the Ukraine watching the cursor on their screen move when none of them were touching the mouse back in 2015. Who's heard about this, by the way? December 23rd, 2015? All right, so yeah, what happened is Russia, the GRU, their intelligence apparatus, hacked into the Ukrainian power grid. And since it is a state-run homogeneous power grid, they were able to get into a whole lot of it at once. And they shut the power off for about 8 hours. We think that it was more of a message than anything else because they turned it back on again. But they locked the local authorities out. They literally got onto the computers that control the industrial control systems, that throw the breakers and everything else, and they shut the breakers off. And they did it all over the place. They also decided to spam the phone number, because what do we do when the power goes out? You call at least you used to call the power company and let them know, and they would tell you whether or not they knew about it and how long it would be and whatever boilerplate message they had for you that day. Yeah, they shut down that phone number, so people couldn't even report it. They were showing on their consoles that everything was fine for those who were watching, and they shut down their ability to communicate. So yeah, it was kind of scary. And they hit about 250,000 people for about 8 hours. So yeah, back in 2015 this happened, by the way. So how was it done? They established a foothold in the Ukrainian power company. They were able to get in through actually an infected PDF file sent to a secretary that clicked on it. And guess what they didn't have? It's called network segmentation. So the secretary was able to check her email on the same network that had the computers that ran the power grid. Right, and everybody's going, oh, yeah, duh, right? Shouldn't do that. Well, in hindsight, yes. But it was very interesting because they took control. They were in for a few weeks before they actually shut everything off, and then they shut it all down. So they introduced malware. They gained a foothold. They put in what we call a root access toolkit, or a RAT, which allowed them to get in whenever they wanted. And then they simultaneously attacked the phone system so that no one would notice. So they used off-the-shelf tools for this. Now we say off-the-shelf, like you don't go down to Best Buy and say, hey, give me your best hacker tool. That's not really how it works. But there are a lot of tools out there built on the dark web and sold or circulated for free that we call off-the-shelf. They didn't, although this was a government that has billions and trillions of dollars to put on cyber warfare, yeah, they downloaded some stuff off the internet, and that was highly effective. In fact, some of the tools that they used were from like 2011. This is 2015 at this point, so kind of scary, right? Like for 4 years, these tools are still working, like using exploits that should have been patched. So our attack vector, it was a macro-enabled office file, or I think it was a PDF, and it targeted their office workers. It didn't target their operators. It didn't target their engineers. It didn't target their senior staff like we see with phishing in a lot of cases. It targeted regular office workers. And once somebody clicked on it, they were able to install that rootkit, which allowed them to have administrative access over that computer. They then worked their way through the network until they found the SCADA stuff. Once they mapped out all the industrial control system stuff, then they were able to put together a plan, execute the plan, and the lights went out. So several weeks, they dug very, very deep into this network, and that's why I say the thing that keeps me up at night is not the things that we found, it's the things we haven't found. Because there was no indication of this to the Ukrainians up until it happened. Excuse me. Man, that pollen count is killing me. I'm from College Station, by the way. Pollen count's a little lower up there, so I'm struggle bussing, but bear with me. Any Aggies in the room? Oh man, tough crowd. Tough crowd. All right. Well, we'll move on anyway. Don't hold it against me, all right? I'm the Aggie son of a Longhorn and a Cornhusker, so like, I'm just all confused. We were in separate conferences. It was great. Now, all right, so Russia and Ukraine today. Since 2015, Russia has basically been using the Ukraine as a testing ground for their cyber warfare capabilities. They have hit all kinds of stuff. They have hit their banks. I mean, there was a day where nobody in the Ukraine could use an ATM or open an account or withdraw money for like, I think actually a couple of days. What kind of effect would that have around here? Be pandemonium. Government websites were taken down. They actually hacked news and media outlets, especially during the last election, because they really didn't like that Zelensky guy, and actually tried to get the media outlets to report that he had lost, in the hopes that it would cause enough confusion that maybe they could make something happen. So they were able to actually circulate on the news that he lost the election. They also got into a ton of critical infrastructure. So there was another attack on the power grid in 2016. There was lots of water. There was lots of manufacturing. Who's heard of a little company called Maersk? Yeah, big boats, containers. They bring the stuff over. Yeah, who's heard about the giant ransomware attack they had? A few people. You know why? Why did you hear about it? It was on the National News and Wall Street Journal. What was recently in the National News and the Wall Street Journal about that? Because this happened several years ago. Maersk's insurance agent finally went to court with them. So the Russians utilized some very special malware that would actually, or ransomware, that would actually infect the computers, look for the keyboard input. If it was set to Russian, it would not detonate. If it was set to Ukrainian or anything else, it would totally encrypt everything. And they unleashed it on Ukrainian infrastructure and on Ukrainian businesses and on companies that did business with Ukraine. Well, it got out into what we call the wild, which means it hit a company that was completely uninvolved, which was Maersk. And their insurance agency, because cyber insurance is a thing, their cyber insurance provider said, well, that's an act of war. That was a munition, a tool of war, and you are the victim of an unfortunate war between Russia and Ukraine, and we're not going to pay your claim. And yeah, that recently finally was heard in court, and I think they were forced to pay out a little bit. So interesting stuff to think about. We can be innocent bystanders. It doesn't necessarily have to be directed at us for us to be affected. All right, so since I got y'all talking now, and I told you all these scary things, let's talk about what could happen. What could happen in the industrial control system space, in the SCADA space, critical infrastructure and stuff? What could we have happen? Knowing what you now know. Any thoughts? The internet people have been very quiet. Internet people don't know that there's a test after this, so. And the answers will be given to anybody who speaks. No, so take down the stock market, disaster. Yes, actually, we've had some disruptions to trading on the New York Stock Exchange, not due to cyber attack, but due to outages, which again is very scary. What else? Any thoughts? I mean, we've already seen Colonial Pipeline and how it caused panic buying of gas in the Northeast. Heck, it caused panic buying of gas down here, and we refine it right down the road, right? Traffic, traffic control systems. Yeah, so smart lights. Houston doesn't have very many, but a lot of cities do. And they can actually be taken over. We've seen that in certain cases. Yeah, airline stuff, air traffic control. Actually, TSA is taking that very, very seriously. They've introduced a bunch of new requirements around airports and airlines, and they've been kind of forcing the FAA to get real serious about securing that infrastructure. What else? Any thoughts? Oh yeah, we've been worried about problems with dams for a long time. We actually had some Russian threat actors get into a dam. I don't remember the name of it now, but basically there are two dams in New York that have very similar names. One of them is a very large hydroelectric dam in upstate New York, and one is a very small flood control dam in like the Bronx. And the Russians got into the one on the Bronx, which, I mean, we laugh, but they got in and had the ability to, open and close floodgates. Luckily, it wasn't raining that day, but they were going for the big one. Other thoughts? Yeah, explosions in chemical plants. Yeah, because how are we controlling them with those big, scary, well, not big, but those little, scary, unsecured SCADA systems, right? And what do we use a lot of that SCADA stuff for? Process safety, maybe? Do we have some automated triggers that shut down things when they detect a problem? Is that all based on software? Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, there's vulnerabilities in everything. We are slowly making things less vulnerable, but again, the adoption lags behind. So we see a lot of legacy stuff still out there because again, it costs money and it takes time. And in some cases, like now we have a chip shortage. So if everybody were to rip out all of their OT infrastructure tomorrow and say we want brand new OT, well, Siemens stock would go way, way, way up, but also you would wait a couple years probably to get it.
We're getting more into wireless instrumentation, and doesn't that introduce more risk?
Wireless, yes. Wireless can be very problematic. One, if you have everything segmented, so you're not connected to the network or to the internet in any way, your industrial control systems, OT stuff is completely segmented off. The only way somebody could get onto that would be to physically access it, except with wireless. Because with wireless, I can sit there in a parking lot with a directional antenna, sit there and try and crack your wireless, get on there, especially if it's not secured real well. Also think about the oil and gas industry out in the field. How many trailers do you think you can walk into in West Texas and see the sticky note see a sticky note stuck to a monitor with a username and password to something important? Pretty much all of them, right? Yeah, kind of scary. Any other scary things to add to our nightmare list here? Can shut down your car. Yes, our cars are now internet connected. I was actually dismayed to find out that I thought, I have a Toyota Tundra and I didn't pay for anything, and I didn't put the SIM card in it and yada yada. And then the other day I started using the navigation on it because I was trying to get around Houston, and it was giving me traffic updates. And I'm like, what are you talking to? So I'm going to work on that. Yes, sir.
I assume y'all looked at the power grids also, the vulnerability of the power grids.
Absolutely.
If you shut down ERCOT and the other two main power
No, that would be, shutting down power grids would be very, very bad. Shutting down ERCOT would be very, very bad. I mean, we learned what happens when it's not even cyber and we lose power, right? Yeah, so there's a lot of work going on that side, on NERC. They've created a lot of regulation. The big problem we have there is that we don't have one big power company. We have tons of little ones all over the place that are at various different levels of cyber maturity. Same thing with water, same thing with cities, same thing with companies. We're all at different levels. So it's hard to create a blanket solution. But we're going to talk about what we can do about it, unless anybody has anything else for the nightmare fuel. All right. So what can we do about it? Well, first and foremost, don't be low-hanging fruit. So your organization should not be the easiest one to get into. And that is kind of the big tactic we are doing right now, is if you harden yourself enough, more than your neighbor is going to get hit, not with you. It's sort of the same concept as, having security lights and visible security cameras from the street and everything else, and your neighbor does no lights and no cameras. Guess whose tires get stolen off their vehicle? Is it ideal? No, but it's a starting point. So we have to implement security best practices, and we have to do it right now. And that means training, that means tools, but that also means a whole lot of processes. And it's processes not just from the security and IT team. It's processes for the entire organization. I, as a security executive, can't do anything to help you if I don't have any input in the business units. If I don't have any visibility, if I don't see the way everyone else is doing business, I can't protect you. And so that's really, really important. We have to conduct some risk evaluations. We do a lot of stuff with like terrorism and things like that in our facilities, right? But are we adding cyber to our risk evaluations, and are we doing it effectively? We're all ready for hurricanes, right? Except for that, 1 in 1,000 Hurricane Harvey, but I mean, most of the time we're fairly ready for hurricanes, right? But are we ready for a major cyber incident? I talked a whole lot about industrial control systems and how they're insecure and scary, but guess what's happening to most organizations that are getting taken down, these industrial organizations? Colonial Pipeline was not hackers getting into the SCADA systems. Colonial Pipeline was hackers taking down the business office. Can your organization function without your business office? Like, in theory, the machinery works, right? But if you don't have sales, if you don't have, inventory, if you don't have all these other things that support production, it doesn't work. And that's the problem that we're seeing, is it's not even so much that they're getting in and shutting down the SCADA systems, even though it's totally possible and absolutely terrifying. If you ever want to look something up, another thing to Google would be DEF CON. Similar to the nuclear readiness level that the U.S. has, but it's a convention in Vegas, and they have a industrial control system hacking village, which is super fun. Nothing like sitting there and watching on the market industrial controllers being hacked by random people in hoodies, drinking a Coors in the corner to wake you up. But we got to invest. We got to invest in our security. We have to make sure that our business units are aligned. And we all have to do that together. So this is the point where we're starting to maybe get to but AJ, I'm not all that cyber, I'm not technical. Well, we'll talk about that some more. So we got to protect our OT infrastructure, but we also have to protect those critical business processes. I mean, like I said, the majority of them are not being taken down by SCADA. They're being taken down by ransomware that's hitting the business office. We have to adequately prepare and respond through effective planning. Plan. So do your risk analysis, figure out what could go wrong, figure out what kind of impacts that would have to the organization, create some plans to minimize those impacts, and then what comes after that. Any thoughts? Yes, sir.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
I assume everybody in the room is chemical engineers. Some of us have business masters or something like that. But when you start talking about protecting the business processes and all that, cybersecurity is something we don't have a depth of knowledge in. So all of this is fine and good, but where do we go to read what we need to do?
Good point.
Hire him, huh?
I mean, it's an option, but yeah, I got them in the pocket. Don't worry. No, that's a great point, and I'm actually going to get into that a little bit. Not necessarily going to give you specific things, but I'm going to tell you where to go in your organization to get started. So yeah, we have to prepare. We have to practice our plans, build our plans first, then practice them. And again, it's no longer a matter of if, but when. So how do we prepare? You teed me up perfectly. So cybersecurity and IT still struggle to plan. And those threats are not getting easier to deal with. They're getting more complex. So who here works for an organization that has an emergency management component? Emergency management or risk management. Yeah, right? If you have a big plant, you generally have an emergency management component that in case there's a release or something terrible happens, yada, yada, right? So what does emergency management do when there's not a release or an active shooter or a drill for those things? Y'all don't talk to your emergency managers, do you? What? I had something back there. They do mock drills, they do scenarios, and they do planning. That's what emergency management does. That's what risk management does, is plan, 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 plan. So one of the first things is get involved in that process. Everyone here, besides me, apparently, is a chemical engineer. Business major, sorry. But yeah, we're smart. We can get involved, and we can talk to these people. We can see where our processes overlap. So utilize those things within your organization. If you have an emergency management component, get them involved. Talk to your cyber people. Even though we like to sit in the dark and listen to Tool and drink Mountain Dew Code Red, we're generally approachable. Maybe hit them on a Monday when they've showered over the weekend. But engage these people in conversations. We'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But we have some federal doctrine that's starting to come out. So anybody here operate some pipelines? TSA has said you got to do some cyber stuff. If you work in a port, you got to do some cyber stuff. If you are a government or a DoD contractor, you have to do some cyber stuff. And it affects everyone, and the regulations are only increasing. The regulations give you a good place to start because they tell you the basics of what you have to do. They give you some checklists and say, thou shalt do these things, and that's a great place to start if you have nothing. Not such a great place to end. You don't just get to the end of the checklist and go, we're good. Because guess what? Remember Experian? Remember how they got hacked? Yeah. They passed a third-party audit for cybersecurity and information security controls the year before they got hacked. Target, remember that hack? Everybody? Yep, non-heads, yep. Yeah, they passed a third-party security audit before they got hacked. So audit standards are great. Compliance is great. I say that as a compliance guy, but it's the beginning. It's not the end. A lot of industrial companies, we have some sort of safety or emergency management or risk management or all three component. Engage those groups and start working with them and saying, hey, we have to put together plans and exercises. Who here thinks if a cyber incident affects your organization, you have no impact? You're not involved whatsoever at all. Not your issue. Might not get paid, yeah. So maybe you should care. If nothing else, for the getting paid part. It's actually one of my favorite things to do for exercises is hit the payroll. Yes, sir.
We're required to take about every 6 months a little training class.
Yeah. And yeah, so a lot of folks are required to take cybersecurity training. In fact, most large organizations just require it from a risk and insurance standpoint. If you work for a public entity, you have to do it. I teach cybersecurity. I'm now an adjunct with A&M, but I still have to do their cybersecurity training every year. Now, tell me, that cybersecurity training that you take every 6 months to a year, you think it's very good?
How do we judge it?
Well, do you feel like you know a lot more after you finish it?
The first time, not the second time.
Yeah, the same training over and over maybe isn't cutting it, right? I liken it to, at least the ones that I've had to take, to driver's ed. You know, like, oh, that's a weird law I didn't realize existed, and then now I know. And the next time I get a ticket and take driver's ed, I already know. You're sitting there clicking through at the end of it. That's what we're finding with a lot of our efforts. So yeah, no, the training is a great start. The thing we have to understand is that we have to practice it throughout. Yes, sir.
I recently worked with Chevron here in the Houston area, and their computer network, as far as me trying to get access to things for me to do my job, was so stinking difficult. It took me about 3 months to finally get the computer set up where you could begin to be productive. And then the virus came and they laid everybody off.
About the time you got to the point to log in, yeah. Yeah, so.
To access things on the server,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, it takes an act of God to get access to files to do productive engineering.
Yeah, right. So that brings up a really interesting point. How much security is too much security? What's the balance? I mean, the most secure system on the planet would be one that, you know, is turned off, encased in concrete, dumped somewhere into a very, very deep channel in the ocean that nobody knows about with the GPS turned off. But that's not real useful, is it? So we got to find a balance. And a lot of it is unfortunately being driven by fear, because it's insurance, it's compliance, it's regulations. It's not, hey, this holistically reduces cost to the organization. No, it's a checklist we have to get to the end of, and once we do, we're good, we'll move on to the next problem. So unfortunately, we see that layered in a lot of cases.
The biggest problem for the chemical industry is that you can cause death and destruction, not economic loss. I mean, if you have to pick something, says, well, I can lose my money, I don't want to lose my life. So we do tremendous amount of safety analysis, PHAs, but those PHAs do not address what happens. We always depend on a shutdown system. This goes right. What happens if something prevents us from shutting down, actually not forcing us to shut down, which would be economic hit. What prevents us from shutting down when something goes wrong? We are going to have a catastrophe.
That is a fantastic point. So I've been focusing on business loss and lost productivity and everything else, but yes, in the chemical industry specifically, if we have a bad day, stuff blows up, right? And losing the ability to shut things down, or losing visibility into our safety systems, or worse yet, our safety systems give us fake information. How scary would that be? Well, they did it to Russia. Everything showed green in the substations. Life was good, because guess what? All that stuff, it's just a number going across the wire. In most cases, unencrypted. If I'm sitting on that wire and I'm a bad guy, I can serve up whatever number to your HMI I want to. I can also serve up whatever number or command I want to down to your field equipment. So we got a plan, we got to train, got to test our plan, we should exercise our plan, and then we repeat. Got to build all this stuff. We get tools, we get plans, we get processes, we get procedures, we get people together, and we say, okay, what could go wrong? Okay, now how can we reduce that going wrong? You know, obviously we start with stuff blows up, and then work our way down to, you know, maybe paychecks don't go out 1 month. Which would be bad, but maybe not catastrophic, because you can generally work backwards from that. But can't really unblow up a plant, can you? So train yourself, train your staff, start reading up about cyber threats, because they are evolving. The scams get better, and they use new tactics all the time. I got phished today, successfully. Yeah, Yeah, I'm a big LinkedIn person, and I got a thing saying, oh, you were viewed, 50 times this week, and, your people worked at McKesson and Caterpillar, and I'm like, man, it's like the S&P 500, like the entire list. This is kind of cool, and I went to click on it, and my phishing, the thing that blocks malicious links actually said, hey, this isn't going to LinkedIn. Did you realize that? And I'm like, oh. So me, security guy, I can mess up. So the other thing I'll tell you is if you have processes in your organization, if you are building processes and they rely on the human to always do the right thing when it comes to operating technical equipment, don't. Because you can be a cybersecurity expert and you can get phished. That was really great timing, really, and nothing terrible happened, but yeah, I got phished. So anyone can be phished. Your organizations can buy phishing testing software and things of that nature, where they send fake phishing emails out and teach employees how to spot them. Sometimes it requires retraining. Sometimes it just goes, hey, this was a simulated phishing message and you done goofed. Some organizations go all the way up to, like, if you click on enough of them, you get fired. It sort of depends. But we got to test, we got to exercise, we got to look at our stuff. Who here has ever heard of a penetration test? And I'm not being vulgar. A few people, yeah. Who wants to tell me what a penetration test is? Hire somebody to break into your building, yeah, that would be a physical pen test, yeah. Yeah, break into your stuff, act like a bad guy and see what's going on. So that's how we find vulnerabilities. That's how we find out what the threat actors would do and what have you. Who's ever heard of a vulnerability assessment? A few people. Process hazard analysis, kind of, yeah. In the cyber context, instead of breaking in, it's more of a passive scan. Here are all the places where someone could break in from the inside, from the outside. Why should we do both? Any thoughts?
For the chemical industry, that's required to do a vulnerability analysis by the government.
The government requires vulnerability analysis be done.
You have a certain amount of chemicals, yes.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I mean, if I lived down the street from a chemical plant, I would hope that somebody was planning that route, right? So, how about third party? Like, we do vulnerability analysis, and you say, oh, I've got an IT team and some security people, and they do all that. But has anybody looked over their shoulder? Yes, sir.
The value of the third-party consultants is they go around to lots of different companies. They see where their cracks are, they look how to get into their systems. They can bring that knowledge to the game.
Exactly. So third parties have evaluated a lot of networks, and I realize we're over time, so I'll speed up. But third parties bring extra knowledge. They've seen other things. They've seen the way other people have implemented. They're also unbiased, right? Or they're less biased. Nobody's unbiased. But they're less biased as opposed to your own IT team, your own security team who are going, yeah, our stuff is great. Of course our stuff is great because you pay me to make the stuff great, and if our stuff isn't great, then I'm not great, right? Get a little ego in there, a little politics. Yeah, so third parties give you a good source of truth. So where to start? There's some frameworks out there. NIST, I'm assuming everyone here is familiar with NIST, hopefully. Chemical engineers, NIST, yeah. Yeah, so NIST has some cybersecurity standards, special publication 800-, and then fill in a lot of numbers, and they have different cybersecurity standards. There's also CIS, which is from DHS, so Center for Information Security, their controls. Those are really easy because they're broken down what I like to call Barney style. If you're ever in the military, you know what I'm talking about. They're made very, very simple, and they say start here with a handful of controls, and then you can scale up. Gather your stakeholders. So talk to people and get them together and have discussions about this and talk about, hey, if we get this wrong, we blow up, something. Develop a comprehensive program. Get your resources together. Do training. And then do that testing, training, and exercising, practice like you play. And you're saying, okay, yeah, that's great, AJ. I'm a chemical engineer. I don't do cyber. I'm not IT. Hopefully some of you maybe are executives, and if so, you have control over budget. But yeah, well, become an active participant in your organization's cybersecurity, regardless of who you are. Ask questions, bring it up. If you're responsible for designing systems or implementing some sort of solution, bring security to the table. If you're responsible for going out and buying stuff or procuring things, please bring security to the table. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where they say, we're doing this, and like, no, no, no. And they're like, yeah, no, there's a business need. And I'm like, yeah, but no. Anyway, better to have that conversation early. Now, if someone in your organization is not doing security, become the cyber champion. Not that kind. But how can we get started with becoming a cyber champion? One, why should you be the cyber champion? Again, you're thinking, AJ, I'm a chemical engineer. I don't do security. Why would I be the champion for cybersecurity in my organization? Sorry? Yeah, you might end up being the boss of the cybersecurity department. Yeah, I mean, we have 300,000 open cybersecurity jobs in the United States, so if you're interested in a career change, we're always hiring. What else?
I think in many cases, you have to go to the people in management and explain to them why there's a need. I mean, you know, they don't think you could actually have them then, just like the one in the pipeline.
Oh, exactly. Well, and, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, bringing that attention and then being not the technical person. Like me, as a cybersecurity guy in my organization, when I put my hand up and go, hey, wait, hold on, guys, they're getting kind of used to that. I'm fairly new, but they're getting pretty used to it. You know, oh, that's AJ, he's going to have a problem with it. We're going to have to talk him down off the ledge for a little while. But if someone else, another leader from the organization who is not technical comes in and says, hey, we have to take this seriously because otherwise we go out of business, you might get hurt. So, some parting thoughts. I apologize for going over time. But find ways to engage your security team before bad things happen. Become the champion. If you're not, yes, sir.
Okay, so one last question. Get down to earth and get back to our level.
Yeah?
How does a cybersecurity guy manage his logins and passwords?
How does a cybersecurity guy manage his logins and passwords? That is a fantastic question. And the answer is I use a password manager. So there's several of them out there. There's Keeper. There's LastPass. Yes, LastPass. That's actually the one I use, but I forgot about it. But yeah, use a password manager, generate long passwords, and anywhere you can, enable MFA, multi-factor authentication. Pushes a code to your phone, sends you a text message with a code that you have to type in. Takes a few extra seconds to log into your account, but guess what? If I get your password, still can't get into your account. Highly effective. So. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, if I get your phone, it's game over. And unfortunately. And
The second layer encryption thing.
Yeah?
The hackers are hacking that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, nothing is foolproof. Again, it's don't be low-hanging fruit. Don't be the easiest house on the block to rob. So yeah, multi-factor authentication. Use long passwords. Use password managers. Don't reuse the same password over and over and over again. Like, please don't do that. It's really bad because if your credentials get leaked and then all of a sudden all the passwords, all your accounts are potentially vulnerable if you've used the same password. And use long ones. Other thoughts? Never click on anything in an email. Yes. Just let's stop checking email forever. If there's a link in it or an attachment, we're just not going to do it. No, I'm kidding. But take a moment when you do get an email and take a look and go, hey, does this make sense? Does this email that I'm receiving make sense? Am I expecting something from this person with an attachment? No? Also, there are some tells. If you read the email and it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, like they're using different, more formal English that is not typical for America. We see a lot of this coming out of India and Pakistan, and they use not completely, but they use different greetings and different sign-offs and things like that, and you can kind of pick up on it. You know, if someone says regards, does anybody here put regards in your email? A couple people? Okay. No, man. Wow. Okay. I'm going to reel that one back in here, but no, if you see something that doesn't seem right, if the person emailing you and you know them is sending you something and it doesn't sound right, you know, that's a clue. Yeah, maybe. The big thing is if you got a question about it, one, don't click it. Two, if you know the person, reach out to them, call them, and say, hey, did you actually send this? Because one of the things we see with the threat actors when they get into your email box is they'll go ahead and set up rules, and we look for that. That's part of what we monitor with our Security Operations Center. But they'll set up email rules. They'll send out these phishing emails to everybody in your address book. They'll set up some rules so any replies get automatically read and deleted, so that when you come back and go, hey, you got hacked, the person still doesn't know that their account is compromised, and so they can use it for as long as possible. So yeah, let people know when there's a problem. Also be very careful what you post on Facebook. If you've got an ID badge that lets you onto your facility, maybe don't post a picture of that on the Twitters. Because when I send people in to do physical pen tests, that's the first thing I look for is, can I get a picture of an ID badge so that I can make a fake one? It might not swipe or do the, you know, RFID thing, but it'll look legit enough that, you know, dude at the gate might go, oh, your badge is having a hard time today. So yeah, parting thoughts, understand what's going on, talk to your cyber team, be the champion if you can. Don't be low-hanging fruit. If you need stuff, ask questions, especially to your IT and your security people. And then, of course, if you got questions, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'm not going to check on how many views I get anymore because that's a trap. But feel free to add me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, and I will be very happy to send you literature or tell you about places to get started. There's some free resources out there from my old employer as well that I'd be happy to connect you with. So, other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, AJ, for the wonderful presentation, and thanks to everyone for attending the meeting. Thanks to everyone also attending online. And we have a networking session after this, followed by ACFH awards, followed by the keynote presentation. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.